A desperate thief attempts to rob an unsuspecting old man on a dark street, only to discover that the victim is none other than Keanu Reeves, in disguise for a movie role. What begins as a crime quickly spirals into a life-changing encounter. What will Marcus do when he's faced with the chance to turn his life around? Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more inspiring and dramatic stories like this one. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Marcus Carter's stomach growled, a sharp reminder of how long it had been since he'd eaten. The faded green streetlight above him buzzed faintly, casting uneven light over the empty alleyway where he leaned against a cold brick wall. He tugged at the frayed hood of his sweatshirt, lowering his face as if it could hide him from the world's gaze. Not that anyone was looking. His eyes scanned the street, not out of curiosity but necessity. 2 months without steady work had bled him dry, and the eviction notice on his apartment door was more than a warning, it was a sentence. The few coins jingling in his pocket were barely enough for a single meal. His pride had been chipped away piece by piece until only desperation remained. That's when he saw him. The old man shuffled slowly across the street, his hunched figure moving with the deliberate care of someone who knew his body couldn't keep up anymore. A thick scarf was wrapped around his neck, and his oversized trench coat hung awkwardly, as if it was swallowing him whole. He carried a simple leather satchel, the kind that might hold important documents or cash. Marcus stiffened. His pulse quickened, and the faint beginnings of an idea surfaced in his mind, an idea he didn't want to entertain but couldn't afford to ignore. His conscience tried to argue, reminding him of all the promises he'd made to himself, but hunger has a way of drowning out morals. It's just one time, Marcus muttered under his breath, trying to justify the creeping thought. His hands clenched inside his hoodie pocket, brushing against the small pocket knife he carried for protection. The old man's pace was painstakingly slow, his head bobbing slightly as if he was lost in thought. He seemed oblivious to his surroundings. Vulnerable. Easy. Marcus began to follow. He stayed far enough back to remain unseen, his sneakers making barely a sound against the cracked pavement. He watched as the man turned onto an even darker street, the kind where shadows swallowed everything whole. "Come on, Marcus," he whispered to himself. "You're not a bad guy. Just down on your luck." The old man stopped abruptly in front of a boarded-up storefront. He seemed to fumble with something inside his pocket, pulling out a phone and tapping at the screen. Marcus's heart raced. This was it. He'd grab the satchel, shove the guy away if he had to, and be gone before anyone noticed. The old man sighed loudly, the sound carrying in the stillness of the night. He didn't seem to sense the predator just a few steps behind him. Marcus took a deep breath, his fingers trembling as he gripped the handle of the knife. "All right," Marcus murmured. "Just make it quick." But as he stepped closer, something strange happened. The old man's posture straightened ever so slightly, and though he didn't turn around, Marcus could swear he felt the man's awareness shift, like he knew he wasn't alone. "Can I help you, son?" the old man said suddenly, his voice steady and clear, without the fragility Marcus had expected. The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, freezing him in place. The man hadn't even looked back, yet his tone carried no fear, only calm authority. Marcus swallowed hard, his plan unraveling faster than he could hold it together. What kind of old man talks like that? Marcus froze mid-step, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't expected the old man to speak, let alone with such calm authority. For a fleeting second, he considered turning around and walking away. Maybe he could pass it off as a coincidence that they'd been on the same street. But then the weight of his empty stomach, his unpaid bills, and his failure to find an honest way out of his misery crashed over him again. The old man hadn't turned to look at him yet, his head still slightly bowed as he adjusted his satchel. "I said," the man repeated, his voice even but louder this time. "Can I help you, son?" "Help me?" Marcus thought bitterly. What could a frail old man possibly do to help him? The thought emboldened him, reminding him why he was there in the first place. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice rougher than he intended. He stepped closer, his sneakers scuffing against the pavement. "You can hand over that bag." The old man finally turned, his movements unhurried. When his face came into view under the dim glow of the streetlight, Marcus noticed something odd. His features were weathered, but not as old as he'd expected. The lines on his face seemed more deliberate, almost exaggerated. His eyes, sharp and calculating, didn't match the weak demeanor Marcus had assumed. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the man asked, tilting his head slightly. There was no panic, no pleading, just a steady gaze that seemed to pierce straight through Marcus. Marcus tightened his grip on the small knife in his hoodie pocket, suddenly aware of how damp his palms had become. "Look, man, I'm not here to talk. Just give me the bag, and nobody gets hurt." The old man chuckled softly, the sound so unexpected that it threw Marcus off balance. "You know," the man began, his voice conversational, "this reminds me of a scene one did once. It was a while back, but the setup was eerily similar." What? Marcus blinked, confused. "What are you even talking about?" The man smiled, his teeth gleaming in the faint light. "Acting, my boy. I'm talking about acting. You see, I've played this part before, just not from your perspective." Marcus stared, his grip on the knife faltering. What was this guy talking about? "Are you messing with me?" he growled. "I don't have time for this." "Neither do I," the man replied, his tone suddenly firm. He took a small step forward, closing the distance between them. "So, let's cut to the chase. You're not going to hurt me, and I'm not going to hand over this bag. Now, why don't you put the knife away before someone makes a mistake?" Marcus's chest tightened. The old man wasn't supposed to be this calm. This was supposed to be easy. Quick. He glanced around the empty street, as if searching for backup, but there was none. Just him and the strange old man who didn't seem afraid of anything. "I'm serious, old man," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. He pulled the knife halfway out of his pocket, just enough to show he wasn't bluffing. The man's eyes flicked to the blade, but his expression didn't change. "Do you even know how to use that thing?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Because let me tell you something, it's not as easy as it looks in the movies." Marcus hesitated, the weight of the knife suddenly feeling much heavier in his hand. "What's your deal, huh? You some kind of retired cop or something?" The man laughed again, the sound low and genuine. "No, not a cop. Just someone who's been in a lot of interesting situations. And right now I'm trying to figure out why a young man like you is out here making decisions he's probably going to regret." Marcus bristled. "You don't know anything about me." The man's gaze softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "You're right, I don't. But I've seen enough people in my life to know when someone's at a crossroads. So tell me, son, what's really going on here?" The unexpected kindness in his tone took Marcus by surprise. For a moment he felt like the man wasn't just talking to him but looking into him, peeling back the layers of frustration, hunger, and fear that had led him to this moment. Marcus shook his head, trying to clear the sudden fog of doubt clouding his resolve. "I don't have to explain myself to you. Just give me the bag and I'll be out of your way." But the man didn't move. Instead, he raised his hand slowly, not in surrender but as if offering a truce. "How about we make a deal? You put that knife away, and I'll give you something far more valuable than what's in this bag." Marcus scoffed, his anger bubbling to the surface again. "Yeah? Like what?" The man's smile returned, this time with a glint of mystery. "A story. One that might just change your life." Marcus blinked, unsure whether to laugh or curse. But something in the man's voice, steady, confident, unafraid, made him pause. Against his better judgment, he lowered the knife slightly, curiosity edging out his desperation. "Fine," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But this better be good." Marcus shifted his weight uneasily, gripping the knife in his pocket like a lifeline. The old man's offer of a story seemed ridiculous, completely out of place in this tense, high-stakes moment. Yet there was something in his tone and his unshaken calm that compelled Marcus to stay put, even as every rational part of him screamed to grab the bag and run. The old man adjusted his scarf, glancing at Marcus with a faint smile. "Let me guess. You think I'm just some helpless old guy, walking around with cash and no sense of danger. That's what you saw, right?" Marcus didn't respond. He just narrowed his eyes, watching the man closely. The man chuckled. "You're not wrong about me being alone. But helpless? No." He reached up and pulled at the edges of his scarf, loosening it before taking it off completely. Then he slid a hand up to his face and began peeling away what Marcus thought was his skin. "What?" The Marcus stumbled back, the knife slipping slightly in his hand. The old man held up his hand, palm out in a calming gesture. "Relax." It's just makeup with a deliberate motion. He pulled away a prosthetic mask, revealing a much younger, familiar face beneath. Marcus froze, his jaw dropping as realization hit him. No way. No freaking way. He couldn't even say the name, but his wide-eyed stare said it all. The man gave a small bow, his signature smirk spreading across his face. Keanu Reeves, in the flesh. Well, sort of. Still some glue on there, he said, wiping at his cheek. Marcus's mind raced, his thoughts colliding in a chaotic whirl. This has to be a joke. Why the hell are you out here dressed like that? Keanu leaned casually against the nearby lamppost, adjusting his coat. Research. I'm preparing for a new role. The character's an older man who's hit rock bottom, trying to navigate a dangerous city. Wanted to see how people might react to someone like that. Marcus blinked, still unable to process what he was seeing. You're kidding me. You're doing this. For a movie. Keanu nodded, his eyes twinkling with amusement. That's what I do. You'd be surprised how much you learn about people when you step into someone else's shoes. It's humbling, really. Marcus shook his head, disbelief washing over him. So what, you were just out here wandering around, hoping some idiot like me would? He trailed off, his voice heavy with shame. Keanu's smile faded slightly, his gaze softening. No, I wasn't hoping for anything. But I also wasn't surprised. I could see the desperation in your eyes from a mile away. Marcus clenched his fists, his pride stinging. Yeah, well, not everyone has the luxury of playing pretend, Mr. Hollywood. Keanu sighed, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. You're right. I don't know what you've been through, but I've been through my own struggles. Lost people I loved. Questioned my purpose. Money and fame don't erase pain, Marcus. They just give you different problems. Hearing his name startled Marcus. How do you know my? Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off gently. You introduced yourself earlier when you were yelling at me. Guess you've forgotten all the excitement. Marcus frowned, the memory coming back in fragments. Oh, right, he shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Keanu tilted his head, studying him. You said you wanted my bag. Do you know what's in it? Marcus shrugged. Money. A phone. Whatever a guy like you carries. Keanu chuckled, unzipping the satchel and holding it open. Take a look. Marcus hesitated before peering inside. What he saw made him frown. There was no cash, no expensive gadgets, just a stack of scripts, a couple of notebooks, and a bottle of water. Keanu shrugged. Not very exciting, huh? That's all I really carry these days. Inspiration and hydration. Marcus snorted despite himself. Inspiration, huh? That's supposed to help me pay my rent. Keanu smiled, his expression warm but serious. Maybe not. But what if I told you there's more to life than surviving? What if you could do something you're passionate about and turn it into a way to thrive? Marcus scoffed. Easy for you to say. You've already made it. Keanu's eyes glimmered with something deeper, more personal. I made it by failing a lot first. I've been broke, overlooked, doubted. But the one thing that kept me going was the belief that I could do something meaningful. That's not exclusive to me, Marcus. Everyone has potential, you just have to find it. Marcus wanted to dismiss him, to call him out for the privilege he couldn't possibly understand. But something about Keanu's voice, the conviction in his words, made him pause. He felt the weight of his knife in his pocket, and for the first time it felt like a burden instead of a weapon. Why are you telling me all this? Marcus finally asked. Keanu smiled. Because I see something in you, and I think with the right chance you might just see it in yourself too. Marcus stood frozen, the knife still tucked in his pocket. His hand slowly released its grip on the handle as Keanu's words sank in. He wasn't sure if it was the bizarre reality of the situation or the genuine way Keanu spoke, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he hesitated to follow his usual instincts. Let me ask you something, Keanu said, breaking the silence. Do you want this to be who you are? Someone so desperate that you're out here in the cold, robbing strangers? Marcus flinched at the question. What do you think? He snapped. You think I woke up this morning and said, hey, I want to be a thief? This isn't a choice. It's survival. Keanu nodded thoughtfully, his calm demeanor unshaken by Marcus's outburst. I get that. Life can corner you, make you feel like you don't have options. But you do. You might not see them yet, but they're there. Marcus rolled his eyes. Yeah, sure. Spoken like a guy who's never had to choose between eating or keeping the lights on. Keanu leaned back against the lamppost, his hands in his pockets. Actually, he said quietly, there was a time I didn't know where my next meal would come from. Before all this. He gestured vaguely to himself. I was just a kid with no direction. Lost some of the most important people in my life before I could figure out who I was. I know what it's like to feel like you've hit the bottom. Marcus stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. You're telling me you were just like me? Keanu shrugged. Not exactly like you. Everyone's struggles are different. But pain? Loss? Feeling like you're not enough? Yeah, I've been there. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't let those moments define you. Marcus's shoulders slumped. His bravado, his anger, all of it felt so small under the weight of Keanu's words. What if I don't have what it takes, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Keanu stepped forward, his gaze steady and unwavering. You'll never know unless you try. But it starts with a choice. A single moment where you decide to stop being what the world expects you to be and start becoming who you want to be. The words struck a chord deep within Marcus. He thought about the years of struggle, the countless dead ends, and the weight of every failure he carried on his back. Was it possible to change, to do more than just survive? He wasn't sure, but something about the way Keanu spoke made him want to believe it. What am I supposed to do? Marcus asked, his voice cracking. Keanu smiled gently. That's up to you. But I can tell you this, the first step is letting go of whatever's holding you down. You can't move forward if you're still clinging to the past. Marcus glanced at the knife in his pocket. It felt heavier now, like a symbol of everything he wanted to leave behind but didn't know how. Slowly he pulled it out, flipping it open and staring at the dull blade. Then, with a deep breath, he snapped it shut and tossed it onto the ground. Keanu nodded approvingly. That's a good start. Marcus looked up at him, his expression a mixture of frustration and hope. You really think I can do something with my life? After everything I've screwed up? Keanu stepped closer, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. I don't just think it, I know it. You're standing here, talking to me, instead of running or making excuses. That takes courage, and courage is the first step toward change. Marcus swallowed hard, the lump in his throat threatening to choke him. He didn't know why, but he felt like he could trust this man, this stranger who had somehow seen through all his defenses and reached the part of him he'd buried under years of anger and despair. So what now? Marcus asked. Keanu grinned. Now we figure out what you're good at, what drives you, and maybe, he added with a playful glint in his eye, you can help out on my next movie set. Who knows? You might even learn something about yourself in the process. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Wait, are you serious? Dead serious, Keanu replied. It's not charity. You'll work hard, learn the ropes. But it's a start. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Hope? Possibility? Whatever it was, it scared him, but it also excited him. I don't know, man, he said hesitantly. What if I screw it up? Keanu clapped him on the back. Then you learn, you get back up, and you try again. That's how you grow, Marcus. The simplicity of the statement caught Marcus off guard. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a different path, one where he wasn't just surviving but truly living. All right, he said finally, a small but determined smile breaking through. I'll give it a shot. The following day, Marcus found himself standing outside a bustling film set, his nerves tying knots in his stomach. The early morning sun bathed the scene in a golden glow, but Marcus barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the organized chaos in front of him, crew members racing between trailers, cameras mounted on tracks, and lights rigged to impossible heights. He tugged at the hem of his borrowed jacket, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar, just like the world he'd stepped into. Keanu Reeves had kept his word. The night before, after their encounter, he'd given Marcus an address and told him to show up early if he was serious about starting over. Marcus had almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Him on a movie set? It felt like a dream he didn't deserve to have. But as he stood there now, The sheer reality of it hit him like a freight train. A man with a clipboard and a headset approached him, his expression impatient. "You Marcus?" he asked briskly, barely glancing up. Yeah, that's me," Marcus replied, his voice faltering. The man gestured for him to follow. "All right, Keanu said you'd be here. You're on crew duty today. Grab a vest from the trailer and find Carla. She'll put you to work." Marcus hesitated, unsure of what crew duty even meant, but the man had already moved on to bark orders at someone else. Marcus inhaled deeply and headed toward the trailer marked crew supplies. He felt out of place, like a misplaced puzzle piece trying to fit into a picture he didn't understand. Inside, he found an older woman sorting through equipment. She looked up and gave him a once-over. "You must be the new guy," she said, handing him a reflective vest. "Name's Carla. Stick with me, and I'll make sure you don't get trampled out there." Marcus nodded, pulling on the vest. "Thanks. What exactly am I supposed to be doing?" Carla smirked. "Anything I tell you to. Right now, grab that sandbag and follow me. We've got a light rig that needs stabilizing." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Carla led him around the set, showing him how to secure equipment, move props, and keep the pathways clear for the crew. It was physical, demanding work, but Marcus found himself strangely enjoying it. For once, he wasn't consumed by the weight of his problems. Every task, no matter how small, felt like a step forward, proof that he was capable of contributing, of building something instead of tearing it down. At one point, as Marcus hauled a crate of cables across the set, he caught sight of Keanu. Dressed in full costume, Keanu was rehearsing a scene with another actor, his movements fluid and precise. But what struck Marcus most was how effortlessly he balanced his focus with kindness. Between takes, Keanu offered words of encouragement to the crew, cracking jokes and making everyone feel seen. It was a far cry from the larger-than-life persona Marcus had imagined. During a break, Keanu approached Marcus, a bottle of water in hand. "How's it going so far?" he asked, his tone casual. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, grinning despite himself. "Honestly, it's harder than I thought, but I like it." Keanu nodded approvingly. "Good. The best things in life usually are." Marcus hesitated, then added, "Thanks for giving me this chance. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm trying." Keanu's expression softened. "You don't have to thank me. You're earning it. Keep that in mind." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He'd spent so much of his life feeling like he was on the outside looking in, but here, on this chaotic, vibrant set, he felt like he was becoming part of something bigger. By the end of the day, Marcus was exhausted but proud. Carla patted him on the back as the crew began packing up. "Not bad for your first day," she said. "You keep this up and you might just survive in this business." As Marcus laughed, Keanu reappeared, now dressed in casual clothes. "Marcus," he called out, motioning for him to come over. "Walk with me." Marcus followed, curious. They strolled through the now quiet set, the hum of generators and distant chatter filling the air. "You did good today," Keanu said. The crew noticed. "That's important." "Thanks," Marcus said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I wasn't sure I could pull it off." Keanu stopped walking, turning to face him. "Marcus, today wasn't just about work. It was about proving to yourself that you can do something new, something meaningful. And you did." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing words like that, especially not from someone like Keanu Reeves. "I don't know where this is going," he admitted, "but it feels different. Like I might actually have a shot at something." Keanu smiled. "That's the idea. And you're just getting started." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder before heading off. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day." As Marcus watched him go, he felt an unfamiliar sense of pride swelling in his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. The weeks that followed were a blur of long days, and even longer nights for Marcus. Every morning he arrived on set before dawn, slipping on his now well-worn reflective vest, and diving into whatever tasks Carla or the crew threw his way. From securing camera rigs to helping with last-minute prop adjustments, he found himself learning the intricate, behind-the-scenes world of filmmaking. It wasn't glamorous. He wasn't standing in front of the camera or delivering lines. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. Every small contribution he made was noticed, even if it was just handing someone the right wrench at the right time. And the feeling of being part of a team, something he hadn't experienced since high school, filled a hole he hadn't realized was there. Keanu checked in often, his encouraging words and quiet humor pushing Marcus to keep going. "You're part of this now," he'd said one day after Marcus had helped troubleshoot a malfunctioning light. "Own it." And Marcus did. Day by day, he felt his confidence grow. The set, which once felt overwhelming and alien, began to feel like home. He stopped flinching when people called his name, stopped second-guessing himself before offering an idea. He even started sharing jokes with Carla, whose tough exterior masked a sharp wit and a generous heart. But one afternoon, as filming was wrapping up for the day, Keanu approached Marcus with an unusually serious expression. "Walk with me," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Marcus followed him across the now familiar lot, the hum of distant generators and the clatter of packing equipment filling the air. They stopped by a stack of crates near one of the trailers, away from the noise. "You've been doing great," Keanu began, leaning casually against the crate. "Everyone on the crew has noticed. Carla won't admit it, but she's impressed." Marcus smiled sheepishly. "I've just been trying to keep up." Keanu shook his head. "It's more than that. You've shown initiative, reliability, and most importantly, you've proven to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought." Marcus swallowed hard. He'd never been good at accepting compliments, but hearing those words from someone like Keanu felt monumental. "That's why I wanted to talk to you," Keanu continued. "This gig is wrapping up soon, but I've got a friend in production who's looking for a new assistant. It's not glamorous, lots of paperwork, errands, and grunt work, but it's steady, and it's a foot in the door if you're interested." Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "You're offering me a job?" Keanu nodded. "I can make the introduction, but the rest is up to you. You've earned the chance, Marcus. Now it's about what you do with it." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. His mind raced back to that night in the alley, the cold, the knife in his pocket, the shame that had weighed him down like chains. He thought about how different things could have been if Keanu hadn't taken the time to talk to him, to see him as more than just another desperate face in the city. I don't know what to say," Marcus stammered. "I mean, yeah, of course I want it, but are you sure I'm ready?" Keanu smiled, his expression warm and steady. "You're more than ready. And don't forget you've got a whole crew of people here who've got your back. Carla told me she'd personally hunt you down if you didn't take this opportunity." That drew a laugh from Marcus, easing some of the tension in his chest. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it." Keanu extended a hand, and Marcus shook it firmly. "Good. I'll make the call tonight. You start in 2 weeks." As they walked back toward the lot, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside him. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting to life, he was shaping it, making choices that mattered. And the thought of what might come next was both exhilarating and terrifying. On Marcus's final day on set, the crew surprised him with a small send-off. Carla handed him a worn toolbox filled with basic gear, her way of saying she believed in him. The director, who rarely noticed anything beyond his camera lens, even gave him a nod of approval. And Keanu? He gave Marcus a signed copy of the script, with a handwritten note on the inside cover to Marcus, proof that every story has a turning point. "Keep writing yours, Keanu." Later that night, as Marcus sat alone in his tiny apartment, he ran his fingers over the script's cover. He thought about all the roads he'd taken to get to this point, the bad choices, the regrets, the moments he thought he'd never recover from. And he thought about Keanu, a stranger who'd given him not just a chance but the belief that he deserved one. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to dream. Not just about surviving, but about thriving, about building a life he could be proud of. He didn't know where this new path would lead, but he was ready to walk it, one step at a time. As he flipped open the script and began to read, a faint smile crossed his face. His story wasn't over, it was just beginning.